spoilers for Devil May Cry 4, and part 2 of the Devil May Cry 4 Deadly Fortune novels. So, we're 4 games in. After the successful new direction implemented by DMC3, I feel like it's only logical to expect a follow-up. A next-gen follow-up, and what better way to bring them some new blood. Welcome to the 7th generation, home to the piss filter and this type of game protagonist. Devil May Cry was also expected for a visual upgrade. Let's take a quick look at the build-up for the game's announcement/release. So one of the earlier things I could find on YouTube was this video of Dante committing assault. There's also a video from TGS 2006 that resembles more closely to what we got. And the face of all of this is Nero. But we'll deal with him later. There was another trailer from TGS 2007. Oh, and there was a collector edition of the game too. Looks cool. And then finally, the game itself was released on January 31st, 2008. In Japan for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, while North America got it February 5th, 2008, Australia February 7th, 2008, and Europe got it on February 8th, 2008. The PC release was on July 8th, 2008 for North America, July 10th for Australia, July 11th for Europe, and July 24th for Japan. But that's not the version we're looking at. Oh, and there was also that one mobile game port, DMC4 Refrain. Refrain released in the US on February 3rd, 2011, and only for the US. But it doesn't stop there. That was a port/upgrade of the game for the 8th generation, looking at the 2015 Special Edition. It's safe to say that DMC4 was quite an anticipated game, and it seems it did live up to expectations at the time. DMC4 is said to be one of the first games to use the MT framework engine, and one of the first games developed by Capcom for the 7th generation, alongside the original 2006 Dead Rising and 2006's Lost Planet. The Special Edition was released in Japan on June 8th, 2015, and the rest of the world on June 23rd, 2015. And the face of this next-gen DMC was, once again, Nero. Something that was responsible for catching attention was the fact that there was a report commenting on how Nero will be the main protag. According to DMC 3142 Graphic Arts, this idea was up in the air until supposedly a Capcom producer, Hiroshi Kobayashi, finally made the call and then finalized Dante to be added. Also, according to the same book, they included Dante because the development team felt like they knew something was lacking in terms of gameplay. In this case, Dante's presence. Hey, they even used the word unmotivated. Huh. But rather, the newcomer, Raiden. Devil May Cry 4 was directed by Hideaki Itsuno. Returning from Devil May Cry 3, the game's director was once again, the game's producer was Takashi Fuji, and the executive producer was Hiroyuki Kobayashi, and this time, according to the credits, only Bingo Morihashi returned out of the 2 writers and narrative designers from the previous DMC game, and is the only one credited for that kind of work. The game was developed by Capcom Production Studio 4, who developed the original 2001 DMC game and the original Resident Evil 4. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of talent behind this game. Now as the game itself, let's talk. So, new character, new lead, Nero. But I say the way he acts can come with the age that he is. We see the setting through his eyes. From the get-go, we're not in Kansas anymore. And by that, I mean the game is happening in a completely new location, and isn't happening in a setting that for the most part, is just one structure. In DMC1, the bulk of the game was the castle, and the island surrounding it. And 2, the bulk of it was a town and areas it's building. And 3, it was the Temminiguru. Here, however, it takes a step forward and gives us a solid number of locations. We start at this church, then check out the surroundings of the church, through a town, and then we get into a snow area, followed by a jungle area that we get teleported to, and other facilities that the Order have. Now on paper, that really does sound like an evolution of the series level design. Now once again, there are 20 missions. For Nero, we play as him for the first 11 missions. And speaking of Nero, he's not Dante. I'm not trying to sell him or anything, but it's just true. And I feel like that works in his favor. So, how does he work? Well, for starters, he has only one melee weapon, Red Queen, a sword that has a motorcycle engine. Yeah! And one firearm, a revolver, the Blue Rose. Red Queen has a mechanic called Exceed that makes the sword rev up, emphasizing the motorcycle motif. Doing so allows the sword to do more damage. Blue Rose can also be charged up as well. Both the limits of Red Queen and Blue Rose can be leveled up so you can charge up more. The Blue Rose, when you charge up the last bullet that you shoot, it has a bit of a delay in doing damage. Nero also has something called the Devil Bringer. that's basically a command grab. With this ability, you can grab enemies and deal damage by slamming the enemy to the ground. As you progress the campaign with Nero, your Devil Bringer can unlock new abilities that you get by progressing through the missions, such as using your arm as a grapple hook. Also, Nero can use the Devil Trigger through absorbing a Yamato. So, on paper, coming from DMC3, this kind of playstyle sounds pretty simple / basic, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I hear folks claim that's what makes Nero appealing in a gameplay sense. Easy to pick up, but hard to master. Anyways, Nero's moveset is definitely not basic. Simple, maybe compared to Dante, but that's a cool thing in my eyes. It's one hell of a task to not only introduce a new moveset, but make it still seem appealing compared to Dante freaking Sparta's moveset. I find both playstyles dope, and I believe each have their place, you know? Anyways, quick side tangent. When DMC5 first dropped, I heard that there was a discussion on how, for some folks, Nero had finally proven himself, or redeemed himself, which I never understood, because for me, I understood Nero's zeal right from the get-go and saw what he was about. That I think it was unfortunate that he messed up in stopping the order? Yeah, but I didn't hold it against him like some people would, or did. Not saying I'm not acknowledging his shortcomings or anything, but rather, I still like him in spite of them. He went down fighting, you know? Bosses. Considering how much time he spent fighting these bosses, let's go over them real quick. The bosses are Burial, Bio and Dagon, Agnes, Echidna, Credo, Dante, Sanctus, and the Savior. And boy, do they make real use out of them, huh? You fight most of these bosses twice, with the exception being Credo. Oh, and I guess the Savior statue too. Let's start with Burial. He's a pretty cool and interesting tutorial boss, and boss in general. He gets the job done and kicks ass for sure. Also, apparently, according to the lore, he's the son of Mundus, which is kinda crazy, how it's never really brought up in the game. Bayo and Daigon are alright, but they can get pretty chicken when they're jumping all over the place, and when they freeze you. Agnes is pretty cool too. Addressing his glass lab fight, it's alright, I guess. Anyways, Agnes, the actual Agnes bosses himself are fun, and his personality makes him stand out amongst these boss fights. You threw off my calculations! Echidna is another cool one because it makes use of the space the boss arena has. You know, with her flying all over the place. Kinda challenging trying to keep up with her sometimes, in a good way. And now, my personal favorite, which I'm sure is the case for a lot of people, is Credo. There is just something about fighting against a humanoid boss that hits differently compared. Not saying that the demon fights are bad or anything, it's just that fights like Credo are more personal and hit because they're used sparingly, which makes them stand out more. Especially given the context. Some people lament not being able to fight Credo again in the main story, but his fight being so circumstantial is what makes it work in the first place. It can kinda give Nero's character a memorable moment for him and his campaign. Oh, and the bosses where you fight Dante? Oh, and Dante's bosses are crazy difficult. I don't think I need to tell you that. I remember when I decided to replay DMC4 after a while, and I got my ass handed to me in the tutorial Dante boss fight on DMD. Sanctus is a really tricky one because trying to get to Sanctus himself using your Devil Bringer's grappling hook ability, I don't know why, but it's really difficult to time it right sometimes. The Savior one is probably the least crazy one. The Savior just kind of floats there as you break the gems by traveling from platform to platform using these springs. Wow, enemies are sent out to get you. Oh, and you gotta activate these switches as well. Oh, right. These switches and springs are seen pretty often throughout the game, appear here and there throughout the game, as well as the fact that the Savior breaks platform as the fight goes on. Real impact could be a crazy time saver. I'll explain that in due time. Anyways, overall, these bosses have thought into them. It's just that due to them repeating themselves, it makes sense why some people can get tired of them, because the bosses on their own aren't a problem at all. It's how they're utilized more than anything. Almost forgot to mention that Bloody Palace returns too. So, in the previous two games, you move up the palace by choosing a portal that each move you up a different number of levels, up until 9,999. Well, in this game, the portals are gone. This time, the BP is linear, meaning it will always be the same individual 101 floors. Every 20 floors, you fight a boss. They appear in the order you fight them in the main campaign as well. The palace culminates with you fighting Dante on floor 100. An interesting opportunity this version of the BP brings, especially with the special edition characters, is having characters who can fight against bosses they wouldn't fight otherwise, such as Dante vs Credo. Also, supposedly DMC4 was originally a PS3 exclusive that was changed early on. Also, Nero's arms glow whenever he's around a secret, which consists of where a secret mission lies or some hidden red orbs. Apparently, according to the wiki, and according to the fan DMC wiki, and the Deadly Fortuna novel, anyways, something unique for DMC4 is something called the Proud Souls. So, do you remember how in the previous DMC games, where you bought both items and new moves with the same currency, the red orbs? Yeah, well, in this game, the currency for both items and moves have their own respective currency. Proud Souls are now the designated currency for buying new moves, or for buying new skills. And red orbs are now reserved exclusively for buying items, or upgrade, like for your health and the double trigger. The health upgrades are still done by blue orbs, and the double trigger upgrade is still done by purple orbs. You still only can upgrade your DT with purple orbs by buying them with the red orbs. This is the only time something like this happened in the mainline DMC games. The only other time where moves and items had their own exclusive currency was in the DMC reboot, but that's its own thing. The number of Proud Souls you receive depends on the rank you get for a mission. The better you do, the more you get. Simple. Now then, I'm a little iffy on this idea, as a lot of other players are. For starters, when it came to red orbs in the earlier games, there was always some agency/tension that came in deciding what to use your orbs for. Do you play it safe and use items as a safety net, which could potentially hinder your skills developing, or take the risk and actively try to get better with familiarizing yourself more and more with your moveset? Now, with both skills and items separated with their own currency, that agency is gone, to say the least. You get to have your cake and eat it too. Something going for the Proud Souls though is that characters share them. So when you transfer from Nero to Dante, you get to buy a handful of moves right from the get-go, which could be cool for returning players, as they could just keep up the pace and don't have to play catch-up with Dante this late into the game. But for new players, they could be lost as hell trying to figure out Dante. Oh, I forgot to mention, DMC4 was the first Devil May Cry installment that was multi-platform for PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. So yeah, no doubt there were going to be new players joining in. The original HD collection that dropped for the PS3/Xbox 360 didn't release until we're left to figure out what's what on their own. That being said, let's talk about levels. The levels I've mentioned earlier are varied and are widely distinct from one another. From Fortuna, to then Fortuna covered in snow, to a forest, and then back to Fortuna, and the many institutes that the Order of the Sword has. Yet, plays itself, through the level's art design, you can still tell that this is all one big setting. Fortuna, such as the architects found in the forest, which according to the DMC wiki, surrounds the outside of Fortuna, has a distinct style that still makes it clear that this is all one shared world through visual language of its art design. Basically, you could tell these areas are Fortuna by looks alone through their shared aesthetic. As for playing in these levels, it's fun, especially with Nero when you unlock his abilities to use his arm as a grapple hook. As for playing in these levels, although there are some cumbersome moments with traversing the levels that's in, like when you have to push these spinning things in order to make an entrance and move on. But you can still use them as weapons, which I guess makes these things a bit more bearable since, they're more practical. Also, the dice game becomes trivial when you figure out what number you want. You just gotta hit the dice when the desired number appears on top of the dice. It's still a drag though, especially when it's a part of that boss rush. That mission would have been less of a drag if it was just that boss rush mission would have been less of a drag if it was just a boss rush like in DMC3, even if it is kind of redundant to do something like that. And then Dante says, no thanks! Also, this game actually gives the characters a proper sprint that you have to unlock first. Additionally, you can't sprint in combat, which is a drawback, especially when you're in wider areas and the enemies across the field and your Devilbringer can't really help. It can sometimes low-key ruin a fight's pace, so you end up having to use the streak move in order to close the distance, which sometimes may not be enough, especially when you're being overwhelmed, alongside the double jump, which is routine for the Devil May Cry series. But this time, thankfully, the double jump isn't tied exclusively to certain weapons like before, giving combat a little bit more freedom and more straightforward. He has a more straightforward moveset, which makes him feel like a breath of fresh air, making the beginning of DMC4 exciting. Just when you think you get used to just having one sword, bam! Exceed is introduced. Oh, okay, cool. Just when you think you get used to Red Queen, bam! Exceed is introduced. Oh, okay, cool. And then, bam! Buster! You can either bring yourself to enemies or bring them to you. But it depends on the enemy, and I'm not 100% sure how to do each command. But Moving on, Nero's combat feels very smooth, as expected from this series. The sound design from the weapons swinging and clashing are also on point as well. Every time I take a swing and hear a thinking, oh yeah, this party's getting crazy. Let's rock.
This party's getting crazy. Let's rock.
No doubt, due to how well the animations are done, the sword's weight just feels right. Not too heavy nor too light. I love how the impact is done well with the bullets from his blue rolls whenever they hit an enemy. When you get Exceed and you swing your sword fast and light, it looks awesome. But I have just one teensy weensy problem with it. It doesn't feel that much different than the normal sword swings outside of speed. But this is improved upon in Devil May Cry 5, where Exceed feels more distinct compared to a normal sword swing. I feel like it's due to how its weight feels. So it is what it is, I guess, if that makes any sense. Regardless, when you strike with Exceed, it can make one feel on cloud 9 when you get all your hits in. Also, there's these badass combos that Nero can pull off when you grab an enemy / boss when you're in DT mode. So yeah, so far, things seem to be looking up for old Devil May Cry 4. And then you get to mission 12. And this is where some of the cracks start to show. Nero fumbles the ball after talking his shit, and then the second half of the game is the same as the first because you're backtracking. Yeah, so if you make it up to this point in the game, you basically played what the games had to offer in terms of levels. Also, despite the evolution and Dante's gameplay with the style switching, he's pretty damn tricky and funky, not necessarily in a good or bad way, especially on the first time playthrough. When revisiting this game, I decided to get some secondhand opinions from the internet, so take these with a grain of salt I guess, and saw some folks claim that Dante feels kinda off sometimes. An example I can think of is with Round Trip. In DMC3, Round Trip was quick and snappy. When you threw Brilliant, you can move around as well and still kick and punch. But in 4, you can't move around as the sword does its thing, and the move itself feels more, I would guess, for the lack of a better term, I would describe it as limped. Also, weapons like Lucifer take precise movement, which you may not always have the time and precision to do so, especially if you're being overwhelmed by a bunch of powerful enemies. Some feel like there could be more to the Lucifer weapon, and the fact that Gilgamesh, the punching weapon, this time doesn't have a straight move attack like Beowulf from DMC3. Instead, it can only be done as a follow when you do another move. You have to execute the draw move first and then do the straight move. But hey, at least the kick 13 move is back. Also, Gilgamesh has a poker motif, which I'm just realizing now. The more I sat on it and experienced it myself, yeah, I can see why some folks will feel and think about that way about Dante's combat. Yet something I would not consider is the claim that Dante isn't built to fight the enemies in the second half of the game. But regardless of how you feel about Dante's gameplay, it still doesn't get rid of how kind of odd Dante's combat can be. And on top of having to deal with reused levels, you also have to deal with reused bosses. Salt to the wound, I guess. This is not to say that the second half is deplorable garbage. Nah, not at all. But at times, even when you're having one hell of a party, there's this nagging feeling that it could have been more. It could have been tailored more for Dante and be its own thing. This is where the whole development background can come into play. Also, I don't know where else to put this, but let's talk about DT Explosion. And DMC 4, it isn't really present here. Yeah, so no more holding L1 to make the enemy stagger and deal considerable amount of damage. Instead, the DTE happens the moment you trigger the DT and doesn't deal any damage, and instead works as to give the player space from being overwhelmed by enemies. But the DTE can also make enemies vulnerable, allowing Nero to use his Devil Bringer on them sometimes. Oh, and the DTE only really works with Nero. So does that leave Dante with nothing crazy with his DT? Not necessarily. You see, Dante has this thing called Distortion. You see, it's a bug. And oh boy, can use with the damage being done. For example, there's this move, Distorted Real Impact, when using Gilgamesh, where when you make contact with the enemy and activate the DT, it causes serious damage. It takes some serious timing as well. Now, as for that whole rush development statement I made, it's no secret for a DMC fan to know DMC4 was low-key kinda rushed. I feel like it's one thing to reuse levels, but bosses as well? Yeah, I think it's reasonable to think the game needed to be left in the oven for a little while longer. I feel like this is depicted clearly with something like Dante's Devil Arms. Have none of them really matched but the respective bosses he beats in terms of how they look. Which, yes, I'm aware the reason, at least in universe, is that the Devil Arms come from the Hell Gates, and not the actual bosses themselves. Dante only has the one DT model, unlike 3, where he got a unique one depending on which weapon he was using. That mechanic was also present in DMC 1 too, to a lesser extent. The lore reason being that back then, Dante needed the devil arms to help jumpstart his DT in a way, when Kyrie gives Nero his sword. There is a lore reason for this. The lore reason being that back then, Dante needed the devil arms to help jumpstart his DT in a way. But that doesn't change that I miss it. Imagine if there was a toggle where you could choose if you just want the one DT model or you want unique DT forms again. If you don't want to mess with the lore, you know? Probably not, but that probably wouldn't happen because too much work for something that doesn't really matter that much. Although if it were a thing, everyone will be leaning towards using unique models again. You know, just saying. Also, yes, I'm aware there's an in-universe reason being that Dante is pretty much powerful that he doesn't need the weapon to turn into those. He could just turn into this DT mode. I think something noteworthy is that I found something. I found the director that they were given the same time and resources that were acceptable for a PS2 game for a PS3 game. As seen in an interview conducted by Archipel,
ありとあらゆることを計算し尽くして、後々ユーザーの方からは不満を言われたところではあるんですけども、マップを行って帰ってくるっていうところも実は予算的には3とそんな変わらない予算で、同じ作り方だと到底予算と期日に間に合わないということで。
which clearly isn't going to make things smooth sailing. How unfortunate is that? Imagine leading one of the most influential unique games, not just for your respective console, but also ushering in a new genre, but also being a part of ushering in a whole new genre. I couldn't imagine something like that. Your baby, your adopted baby, after the original director left the series and was then subjected to this game, to then have the desire to redeem yourself and succeed in said redemption, only to be faced with this kind of predicament. Yet, in spite of it all, people can't help but enjoy the game. Would the game have been better if it had more unique second half? I and many others would like to believe so. Would it give time for people like the writers to make Nero feel more complete as a character, and that the scenario could have been more fleshed out? Maybe. And making Dante's playstyle feel more polished? It's possible. But I feel like it's a testimony to the team's effort and passion that despite a muddle opportunity to move the series forward, they still did one hell of a job. This is not to glorify their troubled development or anything, but these guys are something else. So imagine what the end result would have been if they had received proper time and budget. We shouldn't be too fast to praise with how much they did in a short time, even though they earned it, but we should focus on why and how those circumstances were even a thing in the first place. This could apply to any art that one is passionate about and dedicated to. I don't know where that came from, but I feel like if you're an artist of any kind, you should keep something like what I said in mind. Whether you're a writer, illustrator, vocalist, an instrument player, actor, model, sculptor, or anything, just know that the time your work needs is the time that it takes. Maybe I needed to hear that more than any of us. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Now, before we get to the next big topic, let's take a quick look at the game's soundtrack. The tracks were composed by Kento Hasegawa, Masayoshi Ishii, Rei Kondo, Akihiko Narita, Tetsuya Shibata. He returns from DMC3, Kota Suzuki, Shusaku Uchiyama, and Shinichiro Sato from the alternative J-rock band The Pillows, alongside using Ueda's work since they remixed the track Lock and Load from DMC1 for Dante's battle theme in DMC4, which Masami Ueda originally worked on. Also, everyone but Shinichiro Sato have worked as a video game composer. Those people worked on other Capcom projects such as Mega Man or Monster Hunter. Two composers in particular that stand out to me, according to the internet, are Rei Kondo and Masayoshi Ishii, who both worked for Nintendo and composed music for series such as Mario Party. Unfortunately, info about Shinichiro Sato is the only outlier here since he's a musician but not for video game composition. Unfortunately for these folks, it's fairly limited in the first place. Again, a lot of talent in one game. The female vocals performed by Aubrey Ashburn and the harsh male vocal performed by Shawn, Shootie HG, McPherson, and Hostile Group, returning from DMC3, and the softer male vocals performed by Jason Shyboy Arnold of Hypnogaja. One more thing, so you know how in the English version of DMC4, the main theme is Shall Never Surrender, at least for the special edition? composed by Tetsuya Shibata with vocals written and performed by Jason Shyboy Arnold. While in Japan, the theme song is different. Instead, the song used was Drink It Down by L'Arc-en-Ciel. According to the game's credits, the words were written by Haido, the band's lead vocalist, by the band, with the music done by the band's drummer, Yukihiron, and the arrangement was done by the band, according to the credits. L'Arc-en-Ciel. It's a pretty cool song that still conveys the feeling of getting hyped up for this fast-paced, stylish kind of game. Yet the only thing about the song, to me, is that it lacks the more slow and mellow vibe the second half of Shall Never Surrender has. Still a cool song though, is that it lacks the more slow vibe that Shall Never Surrender has. With just like DMC3, the environments don't have any actual music but rather ambience. The actual music plays in combat and cuts, and it's pretty dope. Some of my favorite tracks are The Time Has Come, Nero's Battle Theme, Blackend and Angel, Dante Battle Theme 1, Storm Through Swords, Burial Battle, Slap with the Sword, Kratos Boss Theme. Again and again, same mode, The Last Blow, Save Your Final Battle Theme, and finally, Shall Never Surrender. When Dante fights Nero's bosses, the track for When Dante Fights Nero Bosses gets remixed a bit. The track that plays when Dante fights them should have a unique intro now, while the rest of the song is pretty much the same. There is a difference. Now, let's talk about the characters and narrative. The rundown of the story is that there's this place called Fortuna that worships Sparta as a god. This community is isolated from the rest of the world, but they start straying out of their lane as the Order of the Sword, basically the military/government of that community, is suddenly used for the nefarious purpose of taking over the world. At some point, they end up crossing paths with one of our favorite devil hunters, Lady, who looks into the situation, which is how Devil May Cry, the shop, finds out about the Order, hence Dante suddenly appearing in Fortuna and shooting people because he already knew what's what. Nero is then tasked with finding Dante along with killing any demons along the way and saving Curie after she was kidnapped. That's his personal goal. During all this, Nero is learning stuff about demons, which could help him figure out some stuff about his demon side, bit by bit. He's trying to keep the demon side of him low-key, but that doesn't really last long. He only really seems ashamed of it when Kyrie sees it, which says a lot about Nero. It conveys how even somebody like Nero with that kind of power can still have some form of insecurity. His insecurity only really flares out when someone he loves starts to perceive that quote-unquote insecurity, really humanizing Nero, and helps give the relationship between Nero and Kyrie a little something. Along the way, Nero finds out more and more about the Order's true intention, as well as the fact that this Dante guy might be alright. Anyways, during all this, Trish infiltrates the Order by going undercover as Gloria, amongst the high-ranking officials, like Credo and Agnes. Sanctus is the main villain, by the way. Agnes and Credo are the Order's muscle. In Agnes' case, he's also the brain. Not calling Credo stupid or anything. I mean, once he found out the truth about the Order, he knew he should try to do something about it. I'm sure Trish being undercover would have been thoroughly explained more if there was time, but unfortunately, nope. Credo becomes suspicious of the Order himself after one ass whooping from Nero and seeing Agnes hold Kyrie hostage, conveying some nuance in Credo's character as he starts doubting himself and his alignment. But he isn't entirely disowning the Order either at first. That doesn't happen until a little later. The moment Credo stands up to Sanctus demanding the truth, dies. This is tragic for Nero and Kyrie. Oh, and I guess Dante and Trish don't give a damn. I guess. No, I'm just kidding. Dante wants to honor Credo's dying wish.
Save them. Kyrie and Nero. I'll do it. I wouldn't want to deny anyone their dying request.
Something about this moment that I really like is how it highlights Dante's and Trish's dynamic post DMC1.
I'll sweep the city and evacuate the people.
Hey, is this your way of ditching and dumping this
You want
mess
to
up?
switch?
It's cool. Let's stick to the plan.
How Trish understands human lives need to prioritize and doesn't take shit as well, even if it's somebody from Dante back on Malay Island. While for Dante, we learn that Dante lets Trish be and makes sure Trish knows what she's getting into how careful they need to be when handling humans. A part of the Order slash the Sanctus plan is basically a setup. Sanctus lets demons loose in Fortuna that the Order then kills to show off their demon soldiers, the Alto Angelos, artificial demon holy knights that the Order made an upgrade They're an upgrade from the Bianco Angelos from earlier in the game. Essentially, this whole thing is a power move. The Order wants to get rid of the problem that they cause so that they can make themselves look better, so that they can prop themselves, making themselves look better and nobler, so that the people will let them take control. And if they refuse, well, sticking some demons when it hurt, who's gonna stop them? Oh, right, these folks. Anyways, Nero fails and Dante then finishes what Nero started, for the most part, as the final boss, the Savior, controlled by Sanctus, is ultimately defeated by Nero, as Nero is the one who defeats Sanctus and the Savior, foiling the Order's plan and saving Kyrie. Yeah, this plot may seem simple, but what makes it really shine is the character moments, such as Nero awakening his devil truth, the confrontation between Nero and Credo right before the boss fight, Kyrie risking her life to save a child simply because she can and it's the right thing to do, and the final moments between Nero and Dante at the end. When you look under the hood, there may be a bit more than what you expect. The narrative may be hopeful, I would say, about the future, not just the future of the series, but maybe for life as well. As for the special edition cutscenes, Trish and Lady want to see what the Order is up to as well, and get ready to do what they can, such as Trish going in disguise and Lady, her role pretty much stops after giving the squad after sharing the info that needed to be shared, and then she just appears in the ending cutscene of the Lady's Night campaign. It kind of sucks that Lady was kind of backseated big time, but I like that we get to see the trio hang out, even if it's just a simple scene at the beginning and the end. The end didn't even appear in the original game, it only appeared in the special edition. So, the face of the game is Nero, as mentioned earlier. I like Nero. He's badass, funny, and doesn't take shit from anyone. Both his characters in combat, I feel like they complement each other. Every swing that Nero does conveys how much power Nero has that he's still not capable of controlling. How the sword acts like it has a mind of its own, conveying his youth and excitement and channeling this power. Now, Nero presents himself as, I don't give a damn kind of person. Seems to only really care about Kyrie. By seeing all of Nero's personality traits on paper, it could be easy to see why people might not vibe with it. It sounds basic for some people, and especially coming hot off the heels of DMC3 Dante, whose character was anything but simple / straightforward. I feel like the character's gameplay also reflects how their characters are written. The core of Dante's writing and gameplay is hidden underneath these layers, while Nero's writing and gameplay is straightforward and it doesn't necessarily need dissecting like Dante does, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, these two type of personalities and gameplays have their place in this series. Yes, I can sympathize with folks who were itching for Dante after what it felt like the series finally knew what kind of direction should be moving forward. And also, that included what kind of character Dante was going to be moving forward chronologically after the previous 3 games. Dante is still funny, even if it's kind of weird how Dante is just not around for the majority of the first half of the game for the most part. I find it funny when he does appear, it's in the most out of nowhere way. But also, I understand where the directors came from when they feel like they needed to shake things up a bit. How plots with Dante saving the world again. It's kind of funny how something that's like kicking demon ass to rock and roll can eventually become stale. That's what time does though. Anyways, back to Nero as a character. Nero is hot-headed and doesn't shy away from showing off his anger. This makes Nero stand out, as this makes him feel oddly more emotional realistic compared to Dante. You know what I mean? I think this is one of the main reasons in which I find Nero appealing. In a series where characters like Dante takes up most of the screen time and feel otherworldly and larger than life, a more troubled youth of someone I can see existing in real life in terms of their character can balance it out and show a new side of the series' character rating. Oh, Credo. It's clear that the whole thing going on between Nero and Credo was supposed to be Nero's version of the rivalry and brotherhood between Dante and Virgil. The game doesn't touch upon the rivalry between Nero and Credo too much until it's time for Nero to beat him up. It's attempted to beat that with a spin. What I mean is that Nero and Credo aren't related by blood but grew up together in a foster home and are in each other's life through Kyrie. Well, that's because Credo is Kyrie's older brother. It's clear he's trying his best to be what he considers a good person, which is following the order of the sword, at least to him.
Captain of the Holy Knights, you are rest. It's the wish of His Holiness.
Honestly, it's clear that they're trying to do a good soldiers follow orders until you realize that's not the case kind of narrative with it. And honestly, using an religious kind of setting to do a character like this isn't a bad idea. As we know, there's a lot of history with corruption when it comes to religious institutions. Similar things can be said about the military/government too, since that is what the order is. It's a lot of things. Not saying that religion itself is bad. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this in real life. My problem, however, is that just like Credo, that plotline just withers away. And I feel like they could have done so much more with that. Credo is shown what he's truly made of when he realizes the error of his ways and notices his blind faith is making things worse. And he tries to correct this and dies. Oof. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have minded his death if they put more focus and emphasis on Nero and Credo's brotherhood/rivalry beforehand. Killer boss and boss team though. And then there's Kyrie. Nero's girlfriend. You can tell that she likes it, and Nero does too. Oh duh. Mainly known as Nero's girlfriend in this game, and the more I think about it, the more I realize Kyrie can kind of be seen as what Ava was to the Sparta twins. A human who helps ground the respective Sparta family member and helps them realize what truly matters. Humanity. I feel like Kyrie is kind of underplayed when it comes to her importance. From what little moments that we are allowed to witness her agency, such as bringing Red Queen to Nero, we see that when she sees something that needs to be dealt with, she'll do her part. It's a shame the only other moment we see Kyrie having agency is when she saves a kid. And that's about it. You can interpret the scene when Kyrie gives Nero his sword as an act out of love, as we see Nero is genuinely touched and caught off guard when he realizes that what Kyrie did, implying that this doesn't happen normally. Think of it as Kyrie getting even with Nero because he gifted her the necklace.
You brought this here for me?
Credo requested. She yearns for your touch.
Thanks. This blade's the best battle companion a swordsman could wish for.
Now, what exactly do we know about her that makes us understand why Nero will go all crazy for her? Besides, being his girlfriend. She seems to be kind, and it's probably why Nero wants to protect her, and it's probably a major reason why Nero bothered with the whole demon hunting stuff. Probably bothered with the whole demon slaying thing to protect humanity. Hiroyuki Kobayashi, the game's executive producer, considers Kyrie a heroine. In a Kikizo Archives interview, quote, "She doesn't fight as such, but she is the main heroine in this game, and basically the setting is that she grew up with Nero, so they know each other quite well, and you will learn more about this relationship as the game progresses," unquote. I thought this was worth mentioning because I never see this sentiment or interpretation of Kyrie mentioned at all. Also, I haven't read the Deadly Fortune novels myself. Supposedly, according to the DMC wiki, in the novel, Kyrie shares the truth about what the Order's true intentions were. I wish I could talk more about these two, but when it comes to the actual game, that's about it. Let's move on to Dante. Timelines wise, we left Dante at DMC 1. Yeah, back when 4 dropped, the timeline order was 3142, hence the art book being named that as well. Eventually, when 5 dropped, it was then changed to 3124 and then 5. Also with the novels, mangas, and animes, which is the better of the two options for me personally. Anyways, let's just follow the thought process of a pre-DMC 5 DMC continuity. Oh, and the reason why DMC 2 was last chronologically is because they had no idea what to do with it. Anyways, Dante in this game falls in line with DMC 3 Dante. He's more out there and wacky. It still works. Although the big thing that bothers me a little is that it kind of sucks for the game to resort to Dante having to kind of tie up Nero's loose end, his fights. I know why Dante is made to fill this role because Capcom was insistful to do so because they didn't want to get rejected by the audience for no Dante. Like how people threw a fuss over Metal Gear Solid 2 did a bait and switch and that Raiden was actually the main character, not Solid Snake. So with that being said, is there anything new to Dante's character that this game brings? Well, kinda. I like to think so. I feel like what that thing is Dante letting other people in and having others be by his side. By that of course I mean Trish and Lady. They come around and they're to help out. mainly Trish though, but as Gloria. Yeah, in case you didn't know, Gloria was supposed to be her own. I'm assuming there wasn't enough time to think her character through, so they just made her Trish in disguise. But anyways, the main thing is that Dante is letting people in and encouraging someone like Nero to do their thing. Also, people were saying that DMC4 could have been an opportunity for Dante to be something like Nero's mentor. Unfortunately, that never happens. Again, I feel like what that thing is having others be by his side. Mainly Trish though. Kinda, since you don't really know it's her until way later.
Are you sure you want to let him go?
Yeah, I figure he can bear the burden.
I know it's not my business, but this could get ugly.
Well, if the kid screws up, then I'll just have to kick his ass. I want to entrust it to you, so I am. What you do from here is your call.
Again, I feel like if it wasn't rushed, we may have gotten that. Now, just like DMC3, DMC4 ended up getting a special edition re-release 7 years later. My goodness, what happened during those 7 years? Oh, anyways, what's new with this release? Well, you have 3 new characters, Lady, Trish, and Virgil. The ladies each get a new skin. Some of the skins that Virgil, 2 of the Virgil's alternative skins are skins that have already been seen before. The red Virgil, or their unofficial name, Dante, as well as the corrupted Sparta moon skin thing he got in 3 as well. The new legendary Dark Knight mode makes its debut here, as well as some quality of life changes here and there. 1080p, 60 FPS is needed too. Now, something notable about the new characters is that they play the same set of levels as Dante and Nero. But where do we begin? Well, ladies first. Get it? Ladies first. So, Lady takes the place of Nero, and Trish takes the place of Dante in this campaign. Lady plays with using her firearms as her way of combat. In place of the Devilbringer, Lady uses her grappling hook. What else could you ask for? And her only actual melee weapon is her bayonet from Kalina Ann. She uses a grappling hook from Kalina Ann as her Devilbringer. From what I played, she feels a little limited, kinda like Nero, but can honestly be a blast when you're just blasting away at enemies with your gun. She has pistols, a shotgun, and her bazooka, the aforementioned Kalina Ann. They work as you expect them to. So anyways, I started blasting. Her moveset does seem like the gunslinger style from Dante's, but on steroid. Yet something that bugs me besides her having with the one melee weapon is when she launches an enemy up, she can't travel up with just like Dante or Nero. Also, she lacks a devil trigger because, duh, human. So in places that her DT is just one big boom, doesn't happen. But it doesn't have the other benefits that come with the DT, like healing over time, known as the wire shot, or an increase in speed and strength. If it were up to me, I would do something where you could either pick between the big boom, basically making it her DT explosion, or you could just press the DT button where her guns get buffed. The guns can shoot her higher, they shoot faster and stronger, and maybe you can launch enemies up higher. Since it's not Lady doing the actual damage, but rather her firearms, it would be bullshitting stuff to make her gameplay more interesting. But then again, what do I know? Now as for Trish, her gameplay is also limited compared to her counterpart Dante. She doesn't have more than one firearm, which were originally Sparta's, but she also has Pandora too. Her melee attacks are referred as the bare knuckle. I guess DMC2 was good for something after all. She only has pistols and only has Sparta as a melee weapon. Something interesting about Trish is her weapons from DMC2 return, such as her pistols, Luce and Ombra, which were originally Sparta's, according to the lore. She also has Pandora too. Her punches are referred to as the bare knuckle. Also, she uses that was used back in DMC1 and that she used in DMC2 as well. This is a crazy upgrade from DMC2. So her control scheme is that her melee attacks are separated into buttons. The triangle button is her punches and kicks, while circle is her sword, Sparta. Also, she feels fast as hell. Like, damn. My favorite move is when she goes spin. Whee! Also, unlike Lady, because she's a demon, she has a DT. Although she doesn't transform into a creature, she just gains an aura. Still cool and helpful regardless. And last, but not least, Virgil. Man, did he get one hell of a gameplay upgrade. So the main thing that stuck out for me in 4 was the concentration gauge. There are 3 levels to it. 0, 1, and 2, or max. What it does is basically buffs Virgil's attack. The way it works is the concentration gauge increases when you play more precisely and calm, paralleling Virgil's character who presents himself as precise and calm. But there are things that can decrease it or not make it move, such as playing sloppily. Dory doesn't reach second, which can consist of things as getting hit missing the head, just running around aimlessly. This adds a nice extra layer to Virgil's combat that's unique to his gameplay and character. Also, he's faster now. Virgil still has the same weapons from 3, his Yamato, Force Edge, and Beowulf. He still uses his summon swords as his firearms. The thing about the gameplay this time is that it is fundamentally familiar and still feels like a fresh evolution of the previous game. And honestly, for a next gen DMC game, I feel like that matters a lot. Now, there is something notable to mention when talking about these 3 characters. That campaigns both have their own unique cutscene at the start and the end of the respective campaign. Oh, and before you're wondering, unfortunately, no, none of these characters have a unique battle theme, except I think for Virgil. Also, when Dante fights the bosses Nero did, the music for Dante turn is different. It's a bit of a remix. Pretty cool though. For the ladies, they have a cutscene them being a kick-ass duo on their way to Fortuna, as well as beating the crap out of demons after the final boss of DMC 4. And yeah, that's about it. But Virgil's scene has a little more going for them. You see, while the ladies, their cutscene takes place around the beginning of DMC 4 when Dante goes out to Fortuna, and the other cutscene happening after the Savior is defeated. Virgil's, however, takes place way before DMC 4. It takes place roughly right before DMC 3, I think. Now, what is Virgil doing walking around Fortuna? Well, he's looking to learn more about the Order of the Sword, and learns that Fortuna worships Sparta, and being Sparta's son, and being a son of Sparta, he can't help but wonder why, and if he can call said place and religion misguided. And he ends the scene with, "Soon they shall know the power of true son of Sparta," or something like that. Oh, and Virgil my favorite thing is that on the wiki it mentions Virgil conceiving Nero and Fortuna like a footnote. Yeah, this cutscene was supposed to foreshadow the whole connection between Nero and Virgil as father and son. Well, to conclude, Devil May Cry 4 does involve the series with its gameplay and levels, but it will not be denied how it is still held back by its troubled development, lacking in a unique second half of the game. The story struggles with the second half, unlike 3, where for 3 it seems to have achieved what it set out to do pretty well, all things considered. Or at the very least, 3's narrative was better executed than 4's. Again, Dante doesn't have much going on for him character-wise, since the game was unfortunately rushed and ended up prioritizing Nero. Even though I would have wanted both of them to have a fair amount of screen time, I get why they prioritized Nero. If I had to pick one, I'd go for Nero too, since Dante had his time in the limelight with the previous 3 games, even though one of those games was DMC 2. Considering this was the first DMC game to be multi-platform before the collection came out, not only would it have been easier for non-PlayStation newcomers to hop on, but also for returning players to have something that mixes things up a little without having to give up anything substantial away to freshen up the formula a bit. The newcomers could relate to Nero, who is pretty clueless when it comes. Nero could be used as an audience surrogate so that newcomers at the time who didn't play the previous 3 games would have been entirely lost, since Nero himself is pretty clueless to the greater world of the Devil May Cry lore, and this ended up really working well since Nero is the protagonist. And that, along with its unfortunate reuse of the same 3 or 4 bosses, as well as the story not being as interesting as DMC3, and how, again, Nero is still the one who, for the most part, Nero is clearly the only one who has anything going for him, character/story wise. And even though there is a considerable number of people who feel like Nero's character leads to desire for more of him, especially when people had no idea if a DMC5 was ever happening. But all in all, I definitely do think that this installment is worthy of being called Devil May Cry 4, and DMC fans will for sure get a kick out of it. And there are those that will still definitely consider it a cut above most action games despite its shortcomings. Overall, I enjoyed my time with DMC 4 and I don't regret it. I feel like that sentiment is persistent. Luz, and Umbra, the pistols, which were known as the wire shot. I guess DMC2 was good for something after all. Or in the Frog case, they're very similar. It's just 2 now instead of just 1, I guess. People who enjoy this game and this series, whether they were there for the original release or the special edition release, or that got into this series within the last few years, the newcomers could relate to Nero. I feel like the sentiment is persistent for a lot of people who enjoy this game and the series, as many still play it and talking about positively a lot of the time. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.